All right, so welcome everybody. So as you know, we do a couple other podcasts on this show. We do Cypher State, which is foreign affairs, foreign policy focused podcast. We do Crowdsourced Politics proper, which covers a variety of political and social commentary topics. And we also do Praxis Run, which is a podcast dedicated to finding out how people put put theory into action, otherwise known as praxis. So you can go ahead and check those out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast at. So we're going to jump right into it with more updates about war in Ukraine. So Russia's war against Ukraine has nearly reached the 6-month mark. We begin tonight's news roundup with updates from the past week. Now, from reporting from The Guardian, Russia has suspended an arrangement that allows U.S. and Russian inspectors to visit each other's nuclear weapon sites under the 2010 New START Treaty, in a fresh blow to arms control. Ukraine reported intense shelling across the front lines Tuesday as both sides traded blame for the weekend strikes on the nuclear complex that triggered international concern about a potential atomic disaster. According to the UK Ministry of Defense, Russia's assault towards the town of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine has been its most successful axis in the Donbas region in the past month. Despite this, though, it has only gained about 10 kilometers in that time, while elsewhere in the Donbas region, it has gained only 3 kilometers over 30 days. Quote, almost certainly significantly less than planned. Now, 2 more grain-carrying ships have actually sailed from Ukraine's port as part of the deal to unblock Ukrainian sea exports. The Ocean Lion, which departed for South Korea, is carrying 64,720 tons of corn, it said, while the Remiri Yaka is carrying roughly 5,300 tons of sunflower meal to Istanbul. 4 ships that left Ukraine earlier are anchored near Istanbul, according to the Turkish Defense Ministry. The first grain-carrying ship to depart Ukraine ports after the UN-brokered deal is looking for another port to unload its cargo after the initial Lebanese buyer refused delivery due to its 5-month delay, according to Reuters. Now, Belarus, where Russian troops were positioned to hold joint exercises before they invaded Ukraine from the north in February, announced it will hold live-fire military training exercises both in Belarus and in Russia this month. It is highly likely Russia is deploying anti-personnel mines to protect and deter freedom of movement along its defensive lines in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, according to the UK Ministry of Defense. In additional news, Ukraine has destroyed Russian warplanes in Crimea. Now, after explosions tore through a Russian airbase in Crimea on Tuesday, Russia's defense ministry quickly played down the extent of the damage, saying an accidental munitions blast had left no casualties and that no equipment had been destroyed. However, videos from the scene and an assessment by local officials who declared a state of emergency told a very different story, with at least 1 person killed, more than a dozen wounded, and hundreds moved into shelters. More than 60 apartment buildings were damaged, along with 20 stores and other buildings, officials had said. And on the grounds of the base, after huge plumes of smoke cleared, the remains of a warplane could be seen apparently melted into the tarmac. Satellite imagery showed craters, burn marks, and at least 8 destroyed fighter jets as well. The images, one taken hours before the explosion and one taken days, did not show the haphazard debris of a single blast, but rather what appeared to be 3 large craters from detonations. The imagery showed at least 8 destroyed warplanes, both Su-30s and Su-24 fighter jets, all parked on the airbase's tarmac. These before and after photos from the BBC will turn to now. So as you can see on the screen, you should be able to see. All right, let's roll in. So this is the August 9th before the explosion. Really tidy, looks pretty clear. You can see vegetation, all that stuff. And then bam, the day after, it's just completely wiped out. There was massive explosions taking out vegetation, as you can see here. These are all burn marks. Like you can tell, like how many blasts had happened here. Crater damage, etc. So Russia's trying to maintain its propaganda war both abroad and at home, but these images coming from various different sources, satellite images that are mostly open to the public, basically blow their narrative completely out of the water. Continuing on though, Ukraine is now shaping the war according to ISW. So let's talk about that. Ukraine is actively shaping Russian President Vladimir Putin's war, quote, for the first time since it began nearly 6 months ago, a US-based think tank said in an assessment released today. The Institute for the Study of War, otherwise known as ISW, said that Russian troops are responding to counteroffensive efforts by Ukraine in the currently occupied southern Kherson region by ramping up the relocation of its personnel and military equipment to Kherson and the western oblasts. Russian forces are also redeploying military equipment, artillery, and aviation in particular to the annexed Crimea region from elsewhere in Ukraine. Experts noted that Russian forces, when prioritizing the capture of Lukhansk, an area in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region in May, withdrew or suspended offensive operations in the city of Kharkiv and the southern axis. Quote, Ukraine's preparations for the counteroffensive in Kherson and the initial operations in that counteroffensive combined with the dramatic weakening of Russian forces generally appear to be allowing Ukraine to begin actively shaping the course of the war for the first time, the ISW report said. In further news coming out of Ukraine, there has been a successful prisoner exchange. So Russia confirmed Thursday for the first time that negotiations between Washington and Moscow on a prisoner exchange are underway after U.S. proposed a deal in order to release WNBA star Brittany Griner and another American prisoner, Paul Whelan. The Russian Foreign Ministry said talks are underway via a channel set up by President Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin when they met in Geneva in June last year. The Biden administration has been under pressure to secure Griner's release after her arrest in Moscow's airport in February. She was carrying, supposedly, 2 vape cartridges with cannabis oil containing less than a gram of the substance, which is banned in Russia. Griner asked the court for leniency, but was sentenced last Thursday to 9.5 years in prison. Her lawyers have announced plans to appeal. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken took the unusual step of revealing publicly last month that the U.S. in June made a substantial proposal to get Griner and Whelan home. He didn't elaborate, but according to the Associated Press and other news agencies, the reports have said that he's offering Viktor Bount, a Russian arms dealer. Bount is serving a 25-year sentence in the U.S. and once earned the nickname the Merchant of Death. And there's been a movie called Lord of War starring Nicolas Cage about him as well. Now, after Lavrov's comment, Blinken said the Russians have indicated that they are prepared to exchange through channels we've established for such a purpose and will be pursuing that. Now, ex-Marine Whelan, 52, a security consultant arrested in 2018 and convicted of spying in 2020, is serving a 16-year prison sentence. He says that he was framed. He was not included in an exchange agreement in April in which another ex-Marine, Trevor Reed, was swapped for a convicted Russian drug trafficker. And that concludes our coverage of the efforts in Ukraine. Now, if you're just now joining us, welcome. This is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We do this every Thursday at roughly 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. We also do other podcasts, as we said at the top of the show. That includes Praxis Run, which is a podcast dedicated to understanding how people put theory into action, otherwise known as Praxis. And we'll be interviewing more people in the coming months and getting a broader spectrum of political operatives and theorists to round out the kind of show that we're actually trying to do. Our first guest was a community member that is a education activist from the left in Georgia, while our second interview was a pro-life activist YouTube commenter that wanted to explore that after the appeal of Roe v. Wade. So if those are things that you're interested in or wanting to know more about, check them out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And if you know anybody or you would yourself like to participate in this, go ahead and reach out to us on Twitter, which you can find us at Crowdsourced Poll. Now, let's continue on with the thing that had blew up the news for the last 48 hours. And that, my friends, that is the raid on Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago, lots of news to cover there. So let's go ahead and talk about it and understand what is happening there. So let's talk about it. Unless you've been living under a rock or in total news blackout, you already know that Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort was searched by a team of FBI agents on Monday. There's been a lot of speculation and misinformation, so we're going to dive into what's currently known about what led up to the search and what it appears to be about. So the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago comes months after federal investigators served an earlier grand jury subpoena and took away sensitive national security documents from Trump's property during a June meeting, people familiar with the matter told CNN. Former President Trump received a subpoena this spring in search of documents that federal investigators believed he had failed to turn over earlier this year. The existence of the subpoena helps to flesh out the sequence of events and lead the search of Trump's home on Monday by FBI agents seeking classified materials they believed might be still there. Now, the subpoena suggests that the Justice Department tried methods short of a search warrant to account for the materials before the politically explosive step of sending FBI agents unannounced to Mar-a-Lago. Two people briefed on the classified documents that investigators believed remained at Mar-a-Lago indicated that they were so sensitive in nature and related to national security that the Justice Department was forced to act. The search was prompted in part because officials had developed evidence, including from at least one witness, that there were potentially classified documents still remaining at the Palm Beach property. As you might remember, in January, the National Archives arranged for the retrieval of 15 boxes of documents that included classified information in January of this year. After that retrieval, authorities believed that the documents remaining at Mar-a-Lago had national security implications. In early June, 4 investigators visited the resort seeking more information about potentially classified materials from Trump's time in the White House that had been removed when he left office. The investigators, including Jay Barrett, the chief of the counterintelligence and export control section of the Justice Department, sat down with 2 Trump's attorneys, Bob and Eva Cochran, according to a source present for the meeting. In the June meeting, investigators were shown where documents were held in a basement room at Trump's residence. It was found that the boxes seized in January containing some of the materials that were part of the NSA's Special Access Program, SAP, a classification that includes protocols to significantly limit who would have access to that information. The discovery of SAP materials has not been previously reported. That discovery led to FBI interviews with aides, then to a grand jury subpoena, and then to this week's court-authorized search and seizure of said documents. It is not clear yet what precise materials that subpoena sought or what documents the former president might have provided in response. The discovery of the SAP materials has not been... that's been already said. In addition to the grand jury subpoena for documents, federal investigators separately served a subpoena for surveillance video at Mar-a-Lago, seeking to gather information about who had access to the areas where the documents may have been stored. A few days after that visit, Mr. Barrett's team, Mr. Cochran, a few days after that visit, Mr. Barrett emailed Mr. Cochran and told him to further secure the remaining documents, which were kept in storage area with a stronger padlock, one of the people had said. Then they subpoenaed surveillance footage from the club, which could have given officials a glimpse of who was coming in and out of that storage area, according to a person with knowledge of the matter. The received footage, specifically from the areas of the club where they believe the documents might have been stored, also was according to that source. Now, the Justice Department has asked a court to unseal that search warrant that the FBI received before searching the Florida estate. Trump himself issued a press release regarding the search this past Monday. Since then, he and his lawyers have sought to present their interactions with the Justice Department prosecutors as cooperative, claiming that the search came as a shock. It should be mentioned that Trump himself made it a felony to mishandle classified documents in 2018 as part of his "we need to get Hillary Clinton away from everything." So that's a bit of the information, and it's kind of funny that Trump is getting hoisted by his own petard, so to speak. But there's still more. So the call came from inside the circle. That's what we're going to call this little segment. So earlier this spring, federal investigators began interviewing members of Trump's staff at Mar-a-Lago and former White House officials who were involved in moving documents from the West Wing to his Palm Beach residence at the end of his presidency. During that same period, investigators were in contact with a number of Trump's aides who had some knowledge of how he stored and moved documents around the White House and who still worked for him. Two senior government officials told Newsweek that one individual guided authorities to documents at Mar-a-Lago and that the raid was set to occur when Trump was out of town to avoid a galvanizing photo op. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, they also corroborated those claims, speaking with anonymous sources who said the information they knew, the location of these documents, and that Trump stored many more at Mar-a-Lago than the 15 boxes in February. Less than 2 months later, about 24 FBI agents intentionally not wearing the blue windbreaker emblazoned with the agency's logo, usually worn during searches, appeared at Mar-a-Lago with a warrant. The club was closed. Mr. Trump was not present. The FBI startled a crew fixing a large fountain, a maid who was dusting, and a handful of Secret Service agents who guarded the complex. The search warrant was broad, allowing the agents to investigate all areas of the club where classified materials may have been stored. They went through the basement, Mr. Trump's office, and at least part of the residence at the club itself. After hours of searching, they left with several boxes. The person said that the FBI left behind a 2-page manifest of what was taken. Sources close to Trump told Rolling Stone he is now so paranoid he's worried about being wiretapped and trying to root out the quote-unquote FBI rat. Quote, "He has asked me and others, do you think our phones were tapped?" one source told Rolling Stone. Continuing on, given the sheer volume of investigations going on into the former president, I do not think he's assuming anything outside the realm of possibilities. So, again, if you're paranoid, which it seems that Trump is, he's going to start trying to figure out who was the mole. Was it the usual suspects? Was it his own son? Who knows? It could have been anybody. But that is kind of interesting things that we're just talking about and thinking about over here. I'm telling you. Now, one of the things that also has been clear from all this that's been going on, all the news reporting and everything like that, is that Trump has tried and to a degree successfully controlled the narrative, at least for a certain segment of the population. And this is something that I said on Twitter. You need to tell your side of the story first. You need to tell your side of the story first about whatever it is. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, because the first person that first reveals anything that's going on in a like he said she said situation or what have you, right, is going to be more likely to be believed, because the response from the other party is going to be looking like they're trying to defend themselves and shirk blame. Doesn't matter what it is. This could be anything from like, stealing cookies from the cookie jar to as much as like trying to lie to the FBI. Like, it doesn't matter. If you don't get your side of the story out first, you're going to be less likely to believe. And if you fail to do that, which the FBI and the Department of Justice did fail at, they didn't do any like grand announcement like while it was happening, right? They could have done that. They could have gotten their side of the story first, but they wanted to avoid looking political here, making it look more political because Trump controlled the narrative at first. Then the only way that you can actively change the narrative and get people back on your side is to what I would call flood the zone. Give all the information that you can as quickly as you can and repeat it as often as you can. And with that, it seems like the Department of Justice, specifically Merrick Garland, is trying to do that. So we're going to go ahead and turn over to that now. So Merrick Garland had response to the flood of attacks and misinformation coming from Trump and his allies, made a statement today.
Since I became Attorney General, I have made clear the Department of Justice will speak through its court filings and its work. Just now, Justice Department has filed a motion in the Southern District of Florida to unseal a search warrant and property receipt relating to a court-approved search that the FBI conducted earlier this week.
So this is one of those situations where, like I said, they're going to release as much information as they can about the nature of the search and seizure. And so Garland has moved fairly quickly, although maybe he should have did this beforehand, I don't know, but fairly quickly into getting the process started and finished to release the grand jury indictment. Let's continue listening now.
That search was of premises located in Florida belonging to the former president. The department did not make any public statements on the day of the search. The former president publicly confirmed the search that evening, as is his right. Copies of both the warrant and the FBI property receipt were provided on the day of the search to the former president's counsel, who was on site during the search. The search warrant was authorized by a federal court upon the required finding of probable cause.
So this is the reason that he is being clear about this particular action, and the fact that it came from the court is to ensure that the checks and balances on the system are being known and being followed. That way that people can, Trump followers are going to believe what they're going to believe, right? They're the devout of the devout are going to not believe anything he said, but it's about everybody else. And by saying like, hey, we're following the process, this was pretty routine, like he failed to provide all the information that we asked for him, grand jury indicted him, that shows that this process has been followed and it has been not political.
The property receipt is a document that federal law requires law enforcement agents to leave with the property owner. The department filed the motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter.
In other words, we crossed our T's, dotted our I's. You ain't got nothing on us.
Faithful adherence to the rule of law is the bedrock principle of the Justice Department and of our democracy. Upholding the rule of law means applying the law evenly, without fear or favor. Under my watch, that is precisely what the Justice Department is doing. All Americans are entitled to the even-handed application of the law, due process of the law, and to the presumption of innocence. Much of our work is by necessity conducted out of the public eye. We do that to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans and to protect the integrity of our investigations. Federal law, long-standing department rules, and our ethical obligations prevent me from providing further details as to the basis of the search at this time.
In other words, don't want to bias anything, bias potential jurors, yada, yada, yada. But we're going to release as much as we can because we have to.
There are, however, certain points I want you to know. First, I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter.
Now that's important. So this means that it went to the highest level for approval that you can go to in the Department of Justice, right? And while you can say that Garland is a political appointee, he's supposed to be non-political. And by going all the way up the chain, it means that every single sort of look, second look, third look, fourth look, or whatever, over the subpoena, over the warrant was made. And so that he himself is taking it upon himself to say that the buck stops here and I approve this because it was necessary.
Second, the department does not take such a decision lightly. Where possible, it is standard practice to seek less intrusive means as an alternative to a search and to narrowly scope any search that is undertaken. So
the reason that he's saying this is because Trump has balked at every single request coming from the Department of Justice, the National Archives, judges, everything. He's basically said, nope, not doing it, not providing information, not doing it, not following you, I don't need to, whatever, right? And because they were left with no other alternative to follow the law, they had to go and raid his residence, his estate. Which, duh. Like, if you have been under grand jury indictment and under court orders to provide information, by law, you are required to do that. And if you fail to do that, then by law, the Department of Justice, in this case, or your state, whatever level of government we're talking about, is authorized to get a warrant to get those documents, those items, whatever it is. Even to subpoena you to testify in court doesn't mean you can't plead the fifth, which we all know Trump was going to plead the fifth. He's going to do it, right? But that means that the Department of Justice is following procedure and the law.
Third, let me address recent unfounded attacks on the professionalism of the FBI and Justice Department agents and prosecutors.
This is his "how dare you" moment.
I will not stand by silently when their integrity is unfairly attacked. Men and women of the FBI and the Justice Department are dedicated, patriotic public servants. Every day, they protect the American people from violent crime, terrorism, and other threats to their safety while safeguarding our civil rights. They do so
at least safeguarding civil rights now. At least safeguarding the civil rights while a Democrat is in charge.
Great personal sacrifice and risk to themselves. I am honored to work alongside them. This is all I can say right now. More information will be made available in the appropriate way and at the appropriate time. Thank you.
So that's important to end on there. So what? Oh, no. Are you serious, Nikki? Hold up. We're going to have to read a news article directly 20 minutes ago while we were streaming. According to the Washington Post. Thanks, Nikki, for pointing this out. Let me throw this on the screen real quick. Breaking news from Nikki. Thanks, Nikki, producer. Appreciate you. The FBI is looking for nuclear documents. That's huge. That's ginormous. We're going to go ahead and, before we get into the attacks and everything like that, and the defund the FBI, we'll get into this really quick, because this is extremely, extremely important. Oof. All right, breaking as of 20 minutes ago from the Washington Post. Classified documents relating to nuclear weapons were among the items FBI agents sought in a search of former President Donald Trump's Florida residence on Monday, according to people familiar with the investigation. Experts in classified information said that the unusual search underscores deep concern among government officials about the type of information they thought could be located at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club and potentially in danger of falling into the wrong hands. The people who described some of these materials that agents were seeking spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing investigation. They did not offer additional details about what type of information the agents were seeking, including whether it involved weapons belonging to the United States or some other nation. nor did they say if such documents were recovered as part of the search. A Trump spokesman did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The Justice Department and FBI also failed to comment. So let's read that again. The people who described some of the material that agents were seeking spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss ongoing investigations. They did not offer additional details about the type of information the agents were seeking, including whether it involved weapons belonging to the United States or some other nation. The main screen here. So basically what is breaking here is that the people familiar with the investigation had said that they are looking for documents pertaining to nuclear weapons. However, they are unsure whether those documents relate to the United States or another nation that has nuclear weapons. Now, this part is huge because we all know that China intelligence operatives have already tried to infiltrate Mar-a-Lago through buying access, which, by the way, it's for a foreign adversary, it's very cheap to buy access to get to Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. It's $10,000. And with that $10,000, we're actually going to go over that real quick. Let's see here. Let me pull that up because it's funny. I found it. So people might know I attended a Trump Freedom Rally tour thingy a few months back, and I get their emails still. And their emails have all kinds of stuff. And this is important to what we're talking about because it's pretty good. So, with congressional membership, you too, for $10,000 can get 2 congressional seats at an American Freedom Tour event, 1 seat at a private roundtable discussion with top influencers, 2 photo ops with one of our headline speakers, American Freedom Club weekly newsletter, American Freedom Club monthly impact call, American Freedom Tour commemorative coin, advance notice of all Freedom Tour American events, and American Freedom Tour Club membership card. Now, why do I bring that up? Because in the thing that I just read off, it came from the Trump people. The American Freedom Tour, the LLC designed, the nonprofit designated as an LLC designated to blink Trump supporters out of a ton of money. And when I say a ton of money, I mean they're selling classes that go for like $40,000 a class. All right. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to have on this show investigative reporting on that. All right. But that includes private things with Trump and access to Mar-a-Lago. So that's important to know. So just for the low price of 10,000 smackers, you too can get access to all the Trump secrets that Trump keeps. So it's very cheap. And China has already been caught trying to infiltrate his circle. And I'm sure there's other foreign adversaries there as well. That's why it's important. Now, continuing on though, with other important breaking news, as we said, Republicans are now claiming that the FBI and the DOJ have been weaponized, and it is time, my friends, it is time to defund the FBI. Marjorie Taylor Greene has capitalized on it. It's going all over social media. D'Souza is saying it and saying this is the Gestapo. Everybody is saying that it is time. Everybody on right-wing media is saying it is time for Americans to take up arms and defend themselves and their grand avatar of their Zeitgeist, of their bigotry, Donald Trump from Dark Brandon. And with that, pretty much as soon as Trump announced that he was being raided by the FBI, an FBI field office and officer were attacked. So let's talk about it. In what was surely the result of outrageous threats of violence that has run on right-wing media outlets all week, which I just discussed, a man who planned to attack the FBI lost his life in Cincinnati today. Reporting from the New York Times as of today states After a lengthy standoff, police officers shot and killed an armed man accused of trying to break into the FBI's Cincinnati offices on Thursday, officials in Ohio said. But the motive of the man remains largely unclear, but we'll get into that. Investigators are looking into whether the man has ties to extremist groups, including one that participated in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, according to two law enforcement officials familiar with the matter. The attacks in Cincinnati came a day after the FBI director told reporters that online threats against federal law enforcement were deplorable and dangerous, telling congressional members of Congress, members of the Republican Party, elected officials that they need to cut it out. The man, who officials said was wearing body armor, tried to break the entrance. The man, who officials said was wearing body armor, tried to breach the entrance to the visitor screening facility outside the FBI Cincinnati field office in the suburb of Kenwood around 9 a.m., said Tom Lindgren, an agency spokesman. He said an alarm was set off and agents responded. The chase eventually left the interstate and snaked around rural roads before coming to a stop near an Interstate 71 overpass close to the city of Wilmington, Ohio. Lieutenant Dennis said gunfire was exchanged. Roads were blocked off for several hours, but had reopened by the late afternoon. Lieutenant Dennis said law enforcement officers attempted to negotiate with the suspect during the hours-long standoff and then tried to take him into custody with less than lethal tactics. Those efforts failed, he said, and officers fatally shot him after he raised his gun. Now, this was FBI. This was FBI offices attacked by a Trump supporter. Full stop. That's what happened, right? And according to the New York Times article we just essentially read, the motives were unclear. However, we have some tweets we need to go through. So let's go ahead and go over to that now. Make sure you can see this. All right, zoom in a bit. So the New York Times has identified the Ohio shooter suspect as Ricky Sheriff. There is a Truth Social account using the same name. On the same day the FBI executed a warrant on Mar-a-Lago, the account made a call to be ready for combat and kill the FBI on site. Zoom in. I hate that. There. People, this is it. I hope a call to arms comes from someone better qualified, but if not, this is your call to arms from me. Leave work tomorrow as soon as possible. As soon as the gun shop, Army, Navy store, pawn shops open, get whatever you need to get ready for combat. We must not tolerate this one. They have been conditioning us to accept tyranny and think we are do anything for the last 2 years. The time we must respond with force. If you know of any protest or attacks, please post here. Are you proposing terrorism? Very important question. No, I am proposing war. Yes, he's proposing terrorism. Like this, the motives are fucking obvious, right? Be really ready to kill the enemy. And by enemy, he means you and me. Anybody that isn't a right winger. It's essentially, he's calling out the FBI directly, but that's not where it stops. Okay? That's not where it stops. That's not where his rhetoric stops. The GOP right now are calling pretty much any Democrat and any liberal an enemy of the United States. And with that kind of rhetoric, this is the actions that we can expect to happen. Because what do you do with an evil person when the law fails? And that's the idea these people have. That is what these people think is happening. They're thinking that the law has failed, it is being turned against them, and that there's no way out. Well, some deranged lunatic that's hyped up on conspiracy theories posted by people like fucking D'Souza, Prager, Maya, who's another big one? Fucking Hosbeck, right? Jackson Sozak. Members of Congress. They're going to think that they need to take the law into their own hands. This is after decades of saying that the Second Amendment solution is necessary. I am not one to promote this whole civil war narrative. I'm not fucking Tim Pool, okay? I mean that in both senses. I hate the man, all right? I think he's a grifter. This is dead fucking serious shit. This is the kind of rhetoric that cannot be tolerated. And if we had a better system of government, the members of Congress promoting this fucking rhetoric would be censured and stripped of their post. Because it is raising the stakes to the point of possibly enraging lunatics, turning people against fellow Americans based on this grand conspiracy narrative that is just outright bullshit. He's basically calling for political violence, and political violence is terrorism. Now, there's more to be said about this, so we're going to continue on. Well, I thought I had a way through bulletproof glass, and I didn't. If you don't hear from me, it is true. I tried attacking the FBI, and it'll all mean either I was taken off the internet, the FBI got me, or they sent the regular cops while I was trying. He's being told by people to not engage in this stuff, having trouble getting information, but Viva Fee said Patriots are heading to Palm Beach, where Mar-a-Lago is. I recommend going, and being Florida, I think the feds won't break it up. If they do, kill them. This is the kind of groundwork that this rhetoric creates. It won't matter if we don't get violent. We see the courts and are unfair and unconstitutional. All that is left is force. So that's the kind of stuff that's being promoted across right-wing media right now. It is the natural consequence of setting up a group of people to believe that there is nothing left for them other than to take up arms and defend the country they love. And it's dangerous. And anybody engaged in it, I don't care who they are, I don't care what political side they belong to, they need to stop that. But it's especially bad when politicians, elected leaders, because they're leaders, engage in this level of rhetoric, and it should not be tolerated. Comment coming in from Nikki Adams here says, quote, "It's January 6th, chapter 2. Yes, it is." And with that, we need to go over to the recent Trump ad. It's not good, folks. And the ad is not good to make. It is a good ad. That makes sense. Like from a marketing perspective. It's not stopping. And as some people have said, some people have told me, some conservatives have told me, that the FBI raid has galvanized Republicans around Trump again. I don't know how much that is true.
We are a nation in decline. We are a failing nation.
And this ad, just to be clear, this was released right after he said he was raided. So they were building this. They knew this was going to happen. They knew it was going to happen, and they had this ad ready for maximum impact.
We are a nation that has the highest inflation in over 40 years, where the stock market just finished the worst first half of a year in more than 5 decades. We are a nation that has the highest energy cost in its history, and we are no longer energy independent or energy dominant, which we were just 2 short years ago.
Should be noted, inflation's going down, actually. We'll talk about it.
We are a nation that is begging Venezuela and Saudi Arabia for oil.
Good.
We are a nation that surrendered in Afghanistan, leaving behind dead soldiers, American citizens, and $85 billion worth of the finest military equipment in the world.
Now, should be noted, one, Trump had that plan. He was going to go through with it if he won re-election. Two, that happened. And it's effective to bring it up.
We are a nation that allowed Russia to devastate a country, Ukraine, killing hundreds of thousands of people, and it will only get worse.
Meanwhile, Trump is saying that we shouldn't Trump allies are saying we shouldn't get involved in Russia or involved in that and give Ukraine any money or anything like that. So he's doing a freaking 180 on this.
We're a nation that has weaponized its law enforcement against the opposing political party like never before. We've never
Like I said, they had this ready.
seen anything like this. We're a nation that no longer has a free and fair press. Fake news is about all you get. We are a nation where free speech is no longer allowed, where crime is
Yeah, whatever here, buddy.
rampant like never before, where the economy has been collapsing, where more people died of COVID in 2021 than in 2020.
Okay, Delta, like, how is that anybody's fault? What the fuck?
We're a nation that is allowing
I take that back. It's partly your people's fault for saying to people to not get vaccinated. So take that up with your own party, dipshit.
Iran to build a massive nuclear weapon, and China to use the trillions and trillions of dollars it's taken from the United States to build a military to rival our own.
Some of that money you gave them.
We are a nation that over the past 2 years is no longer respected or listened to all around the world. And we are a nation that is hostile to liberty and freedom and faith.
Oh,
we are a nation whose economy...
To be clear, this is like another 4 minutes of this.
economy is floundering, whose stores are not stocked, whose deliveries are not coming, and whose educational system is ranked at the bottom of every list.
Nikki, are you referring to the fact that this might be a Jan 6 tent?
We are a nation that in many ways has become a joke. But soon we will have greatness again. It was hard-working patriots like you who built this country, and it is hard-working patriots like you who are going to save our country. There is no mountain we cannot climb. There is no summit we cannot reach. There is no challenge we cannot meet. There is no victory we cannot have. We will not bend. We will not break. We
Oh no.
will not yield. Ever, ever, ever. We will never give in. We will never give up. And we will never, ever back down. We will never let you down. As long as we are confident and united, the tyrants we are fighting do not stand even a little chance. Because we are Americans, and Americans kneel to God and God alone. And it is time to start talking about greatness for our country again.
And of course, Guilfoyle gets the, yeah, and you'll never let me down if you do those things. Right, yes. So they had that ad ready, 100% ready for the Trump. And so they knew that by refusing to honor those subpoenas, they were going to get raided. That's 100%. Like, they knew it. This ad was ready. This ad is very well produced. That's probably one of the best political ads I've seen in a long time. I mean, it's mostly bullshit, but that's not the point. The point is to use effective rhetoric in order to convince people that are already almost there that you're correct. And the imagery, fantastic. The cadence, very good for persuasion. And it really, really, really sucks. Really sucks that the liberals and lefties don't engage in this kind of superb messaging. That a lot of liberals and leftists want to rely on the fact that they are correct to convince people that they are right. But that's not how people operate. It's all vibes, man. It's all vibes. People vote on how they feel, and if something feels true, it is. That's how you win political messaging. So if you think that ad isn't going to be effective, you're wrong. 100% full stop, absolutely wrong. So we need people to combat these kind of narratives. And and if you're a Democrat, liberal, leftist, or whatever, you need to get your politicians on board doing that. Because you can't rely on the fact that you're correct to be right. And that's how I'm going to end that segment. So, what can you do? Well, this is the call to action, everybody. If you have news you want to see us cover on the News Roundup here tonight, or if you'd like to join one of our many panels, here's how you can reach out to us. First, go ahead and join the Discord. Discord's where we're trying to build up a good community, and it's where we'll be holding contests. Yes, I've been saying that for a while, but I looked at our finances. We have some money, so we're going to have a contest. And I got to talk to some people about the exact contest and the time frame and the way we're going to do it. But we are going to have a contest, and it will be probably around predictions of how the House is going to go. That's what it's likely going to be about. So go ahead and join Discord for that. You can also reach out to me on Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll, that's where I like to post memes and wherever the else I feel like, within or less. We also do run a Facebook group. You can get to us there from Facebook/groups/the Commons, Tribune Commons, and those are the ways that you can reach out. Hey, thanks for the follow. There it is. All right, so we're going to continue on with the News Roundup now. Let's go ahead and get into it. So we're going to continue on with some U.S. politics here, everybody. So prior to our little break for that conversation with Tiberius D, we finished up with Mar-a-Lago. Now we're going to continue on with U.S. politics. Starting off with Congress. So the U.S. Congress has been very busy with this week rounding up 2 months of legislative victories for Democrats and an embarrassing partisan display from Republicans. That partisan display from Republicans we talked about last week, and that was the PACT Act. To give a little bit of a brief recap of that, the PACT Act was structured in such a way to ensure that veterans that fought wars in Afghanistan and Iraq that were exposed to toxic chemicals from burn pit exposure got the health care that they need, the long-term health care. These individuals have like 10-20 times the rates of cancer than the general population, and a whole host of other issues, not just PTSD, but we're talking physical issues from those exposures. This was a very, very important thing to Jon Stewart, and Republicans were originally for it until they weren't. They voted against it because they were pissed off at Joe Manchin and Democrats pulling a fast one on them with the budget reconciliation bill, which we're going to talk about shortly. But they voted against it. But because of pressure from veteran groups and Jon Stewart leading the public charge of those veteran groups and the exposure of all the right-wing grifters therein, they came back and passed it on almost the same vote that they had it the first time. The bill didn't change anything. There was some language changed because the House had to originate spending. The Senate can't do that, so they were worried about that, so they changed a little bit of the language, but it was just a technicality. None of the underlining data or underlining numbers, the tax numbers, anything of that changed. So Republicans were just playing fuck games, and it lost on it. So that was what that is. Well, let's talk about the budget reconciliation bill and what it includes. So the biggest news coming out of Congress this week is the Senate vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which we did talk about briefly last week. That is a reconciliation bill that just a few months ago looked dead in the water. To the surprise of Senate Republicans, Senator Joe Manchin of Virginia last week announced that he and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York had reached a compromise reconciliation bill. After an overnight vote-a-rama process, the measure passed the Senate 51-50, with Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie. Now, this is the biggest action ever taken by Congress to combat climate change. The measure also empowers Medicare to negotiate drug prices, a longtime Democrat priority, and caps out-of-pocket spending for Medicare patients. Some Democrats were already running campaign ads on proposals included in the bill, and now they can point to the legislation as proof that they can deliver on those promises. The bill is expected to easily pass the House tomorrow, Friday, August, for anybody who might be listening to this afterwards, August 12th. So the legislation does the following: allows Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices. Now, this is probably the biggest thing that's going to impact the most people directly and indirectly. And the reason I say that is because Medicare is the price maker for prescription drugs. Why is Medicare the price maker? Because they are the biggest purchaser of drugs on the market. And so if you're the biggest purchaser and you can negotiate the price lower, everybody else is going to follow suit because they're not going to allow people to get one up on them, even if it's the US government. So this is going to lower drug cost across the board, at least for the drugs that Medicare will negotiate. There's some issues in there where they're only doing like 10 drugs at a time, stuff like that. But it is going to have real material impact on everybody, not just people that are on Medicare. Now, for people that are just on Medicare, it is capping out-of-pocket prescription drug cost for seniors. So the Medicare beneficiaries receive better financial protection by capping out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs at $2,000 annually. Right now, people on Medicare can spend up, I've heard people spending $15,000 a year on drug prices. The government is going to pick up the rest of that tab, and out of pocket, they're going to only have to spend $2,000. So if you're one of those people that have a lot of prescription drugs, if a family member has to spend a lot on insulin or what have you, this is going to be directly impacting your finances in a beneficial way. Now, it also prevents higher healthcare costs. Health coverage will be more affordable for more than 10 million people because the Inflation Reduction Act extends Enhanced Affordable Care Act marketplace subsidies through 2025. Prior to this legislation, that subsidy was going to expire at the beginning of next year or at the end of this year. It cracks down on big pharma greed by preventing drug companies from hiking prices above the rate of inflation. Again, drug prices have exceeded the rate of inflation a lot in the last 10 years, and we're going to say no more to that. Now, it also is going to cut down on carbon pollution dramatically. With this bill, emissions in 2030 are projected to be 40% below peak levels, putting our climate goal of cutting pollution to half of peak levels by the end of the decade within reach. But on that other end, while that people might think that is going to lead to increased prices for energy, the bill actually tackles that on the back end as well, and it's moving to lower energy cost. It does this by doing the following things. First off is that fossil fuels that drive inflation, but the bill is going to help families switch to cheaper electricity for home heating, cooking, and vehicles, helping Americans cut their utility bills and skip the gas station. Now, with that, people might say, oh, this is only going to impact people that can utilize those tax credits, and people that rent aren't going to experience it. No. People that rent are going to experience this too, because there is every incentive to rental units to also upgrade their appliances, even on the low end, because they're going to get the tax incentive, so it's going to be cheaper for them. And over the long run, replacing a refrigerator that's 10 years old is more cost effective, especially with a subsidy, than fixing it and delaying that for another 5 years. So that's going to improve people's lives as well. Now, the average household is expected to save $500, and even households that don't make the switch will see lower electricity and natural gas prices due to some of the things that are in the bill, such as increasing the amount of energy being brought online. Total spending in oil could go down by nearly 25% over the decade. This is an estimate based on the amount of energy production that's going to switch to greener energy. So we're talking wind, solar, hydropower, maybe some fuel cells, or electric cars. Also, it would provide middle and working class consumers with a tax credit for the purchase of cleaner vehicles that are made in North America, specifically made in America, which is Biden's bring back made in America, bring back all these things. So not only will that help, families switch over to a cheaper electric car in terms of maintenance and gas prices, but it will also help generate jobs in the United States by providing subsidies that go towards American manufacturers. Now it also has created jobs, like I just said, through those subsidies. The bill also builds a new clean energy manufacturing economy by investing in refurbishing old factories, building new factories, requiring high wages, and mandating apprenticeship training for companies using clean energy tax credits. The bill will spur domestic production of batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, and more, setting the United States up to compete in the global clean energy economy and creating millions of clean energy jobs. Now, it also invests in communities that have suffered the most from environmental and health hazards. So communities who have experienced dangerous, long-standing environmental and health threats will have access to $3 billion in environmental and climate justice block grants to cut pollution and improve public health. In all, it will fund $60 billion worth of environmental justice priorities. Now, people might think that environmental justice is just a buzzword, communism by another name, what have you. Wrong. Okay? The reason why environmental justice is important is because we have communities that have been devastated by pollution and polluters and things of that nature that the government has already come through, fined the company no longer is in business, but the damage remains there. You have people living on sites that are hazardous to their health, and the money that is designated for these initiatives are to clean up those areas, or absent the ability to clean them up to make them livable, help people move to other areas to avoid health hazards. That is going to be a huge boon on the economy in those local areas, and it's good that this is finally being tackled in a more systemic way. Now, this bill also cracks down on wealthy tax cheats. So the lack of adequate enforcement funding led to a massive drop in the rate of audited U.S. households earning $5 million or more per year, plummeting to just 2% in 2019 from a rate of over 16% in 2010. New funding in this bill will help enforce the tax code more fairly. Now, there's been a lot of talk online about the IRS going after middle class and lower income people. Some studies show that they do have, over the last 10 years or so, gone after more lower income people. Part of that reason is because of lack of funding to do complicated tax audits of people that make more money and have the ability to dodge taxes in more comprehensive ways. Now, the bill itself doesn't say and make any mention of hiring 87,000 new IRS agents. Even if it did, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, and it wouldn't necessarily mean coming after you. What it does mean is that the IRS has been gutted over the last 10, 15 years. It's been a cause du jour for Republicans to go after the IRS and defund it, starve the beast so it can't do its job properly. And, they don't like taxes anyways. They would rather the IRS doesn't exist, right? It's one of the top 4 abolished government agencies that's called into question, right? But when the IRS says it's going to hire more agents, it's not talking about door kickers. It is talking about everybody that works for the IRS. We're talking people that enforce tax compliance, which means accountants. We're talking about people that are agents on the phone. So when you have an issue with your taxes or you're having an issue with your refund, you call them. They're an IRS agent. That's what they're called. Okay. And you're talking about people that go after actual criminals, not just dodging taxes, but engaged in criminal enterprises under RICO statute. So we're talking FBI. We're talking we're talking mafia. We're talking about people like cartels, drug lords, those kind of people. The IRS helps deal with those people as well by doing complicated tax audits, tracking money being sent overseas through various number of ways of like LLCs and tax havens and the like, and coming down on those people to not only recover lost tax revenue, but also bring criminals to justice. So those are all the kind of people that are in the IRS. And not only that, a lot of IRS agents are on the older side, so they're going to have a lot of retirements, and those people need to be replaced with new agents. So that's what it does here. Now, furthermore, this bill fixes loopholes that allow wealthy corporations and Wall Street fund managers to avoid paying their fair share in taxes. The bill requires that every corporation with at least $1 billion worth of profits, so this is after expenses, raw profits, pay a minimum of 15% on their profits in taxes, so we will stop having large profitable companies that pay no taxes at all. This means that you can carry your losses for like 10 years, but you're going to pay some more. So there's people, these are things where this is what we're talking about on this file. Now, the bill originally was going to fix a loophole that allowed hedge fund managers to hide away some of their income inside investment instruments. But Cinema, being bought and paid for shill she is, got that removed. And that was replaced by a stock buyback surcharge. So if a company engages in stock buyback, they're going to have to pay a tax on that buyback, and that's going to probably tamp down on buybacks to a degree, but we'll see. Either way, that has been replaced, and there's going to be something more of that. And finally, the bill aims to cut inflation and drive down the deficit. It accomplishes this by decreasing demand through fairer taxes, increasing supply through investments in manufacturing clean energy, and cutting the cost of energy, healthcare, and prescription drugs. Unlike the $1.9 trillion 2017 Republican tax bill, the plan is actually fully paid for and will decrease the deficit by $300 billion on top of the $1.7 trillion deficit reduction already projected this year. Now, we do have a comment coming through from Maybe It Isn't Me saying that I am just engaged in Dem spin. The rich does not eat the rich. They will support themselves and hurt small people. Sad dude, you're a conservative at this point. No, dude, I'm not being conservative. So what this essentially boils down to is it's a difference of opinion about what the IRS is going to do. The IRS with this money isn't going to go after low-hanging fruit. One, it would be a marketing disaster for them to do so at this point. All eyes are on the IRS. If they go after the lower income people that are like avoiding paying $10,000 on under the table money, they're going to be looked at and scorned, and everybody's going to hate them. They're going to want to get some big wins straight off with this new hiring spree that they're going on. So they're going to go after people they're talking Bernie Madoffs of the world, right? People that have avoided taxes and have cheated people out of money. And that's what they're going to go after. And those taxes, the way that people hide that money from the IRS is very complicated. There seems to be this notion, especially among right-wing circles, that the IRS only needs one agent to go over one tax code, one tax file return. Absolutely not. That's not how simple taxes are for the very rich and powerful people. They go through, and the way that this is done is it's essentially done in a kind of money laundering sort of way, where they take money from one business, filter it through another business, put it into a trust, put that trust into the Cayman Islands, Delaware, put it into the Sweden, what have you, Swiss bank, and then try to hide that money from the IRS by playing these games with moving it around and claiming different things on their taxes, right? It's what we saw from the Panama Papers, and it's what we saw from, there was another one released recently that I can't remember the name of, but that's what we see. And it takes a lot of processing to find these gimmicks because they're good at what they do. They pay people to hide this money, and they're very good at it. So it requires multiple agents to go over these tax returns to find the money laundering operations they're engaged in. Money laundering or tax avoidance, whichever, right? Money laundering is more FBI, tax evasion is more IRS. So that's what we're seeing from this here. And I'm honestly glad. I mean, this is a huge talking point that, IRS is going to come kick down your door. They're not going to do that. That's not what the IRS does. If a person has failed to pay their taxes, the majority of instances of that happening is a bill comes in the mail and it stipulates how you failed to pay your taxes. They'll even list it out for you. You made X amount of money, you paid X amount of money, you owe us X amount of money. You paid X amount of money, you made Y amount of money, you owe us Z back on the end. They're not going to come after people that are like $10 behind on their taxes. That'll just get applied to the next bill. We're talking thousands upon thousands of dollars here. So that's what's likely going to happen. Now we have another comment. Let me see what this one is really quick. Yeah. So we have Thomas D saying Janet Yellen has issued a directive for the IRS not to target middle-class payers. The frightened tax-cheating Republicans had better be middle class. True. Thank you, Thomas, for that comment. So that's what we're going to be seeing here. And honestly, good. I don't know if you saw my little YouTube video. Actually, we'll put it up right now. All right, we're gonna pull it up right now just because I think it's fun, and we're doing more shorts on YouTube. We're doing more shorts on YouTube, and I think they're fantastic. And we do a little trolling every once in a while over here. So according to Marco Rubio, Valdemis is going to vote to add 87,000 new IRS agents, making the IRS bigger than the State Department, Defense Department, and Customs Border Patrol combined. You know what I say to that? Good. So according to Marco Rubio... All right, so we do a little trolling here every once in a while, but honestly, pay your fucking taxes. They're not going to come after middle-class people, as we already said. They're coming after the bigger tax cheats, and that's a good thing. Now, continuing on with the copy, though, Senate Democrats were able to keep the out-of-pocket price for most insulin at $35 per month, but millions of diabetics will still pay more after Republicans amended the measure to exclude private insurers. After the Senate parliamentarian ruled that the cap didn't fit the rules of reconciliation, Republicans pushed to limit the cap to Medicare only. This amendment required the votes of 60 senators to overcome, and there were only 7 Republican votes. Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson summed up his refusal to vote for the amendment, saying, quote, "In reality, the Dems wanted to break Senate rules to pass insulin pricing cap instead of going through regular order. They put this in a bill it wasn't allowed in, all for show," he tweeted on Sunday. Complaints about Senate procedure are unlikely to sit well with Americans who must use insulin to treat diabetes. A Yale University study found that 14% of insulin users spend 40% or more of their income on insulin. And insulin prices in the United States have skyrocketed in the past decades, while other countries' prices remained stable. A study conducted by the RAND Corporation in 2018 found that the average cost of insulin per unit in the United States was $98.70, compared to just $12 in Canada and only $7.52 in the United Kingdom. In other news from Congress, though, we have another bipartisan win on the horizon. So a bipartisan coalition of lawmakers in both chambers has introduced legislation to give a pathway to citizenship to tens of thousands of Afghan evacuees. The Afghan Adjustment Act would allow Afghans with temporary humanitarian status to apply for permanent legal residencies in the United States, rather than through the asylum system or special immigrant visa program. The legislation would also broaden eligibility for the special immigrant visas, which is designed for allies who aided the United States military operations in the country. More than 76,000 Afghans were evacuated to the United States after the withdrawal late last year, mainly using the humanitarian parole process, which is supposed to be used on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian or significant public benefit reasons. The bill will likely face resistance for some Republicans and immigration hawks who object to the number of Afghans coming to the United States, some of whom do not have any connection with American military operations in the country and have also raised concern about vetting and security. All in all, though, for a Congress known mostly for inaction over the last decade or more, the Democrats have a much to go about going into the midterm elections. And they do. But as we said in the little segment that we're going to have another episode of, another publication out of this, Democrats are still likely to lose in midterms. At least one is going to pass, but it all depends on what happens in the next 2 or 3 months. August, September, October, 2 months. Next 2 months, there might be some surprises. There might be some good wins. We will see, and when we see, we will let you all know, and you can come to this program specifically to get updates therein. So let's continue on with some news items and some news bites, and we have some interesting news coming out of here. And part of that interesting news is capitalism run amok among streaming giants and franchise fees in Texas. So why did I say capitalism run amok? Because a lawsuit filed Thursday by 25 Texas cities claims that Disney, Hulu, and Netflix have for years stiffed the cities out of dollars the streaming giants are required to pay under state law. Austin, Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth are among the cities that sued the streaming service in Dallas County to recover money they say have been owed since 2007 and to require the service to pay each year going forward. Under state law, the services have to pay cities a franchise fee, which traditional cable providers also pay, in exchange for using communication lines over public rights of way to transmit their services into homes. As more people abandon cable subscriptions in favor of streaming services, cities have lost franchise fee revenue, money that goes to fund city services like police and fire protection, as well as roads, parks, and libraries. Cities haven't made up for that revenue with fees from streaming services, said Stephen Wollins, a former Texas lawmaker and lead attorney for the cities. So even though the state law classifies them as video service providers that must pay the fees, the major streamers haven't paid cities a dime, Wollins says. Quote, "They should have been paying this fee from the very beginning. Shame on them because they are using the public right-of-way that every other company pays the city to use." The cities are seeking funds dating to when the services launched. Netflix in 2007, Hulu in 2008, and Disney Plus, the Walt Disney Company, streaming since in service in late 2019. Their subscriber-based numbers in the tens of millions worldwide, with Netflix on the top with more than 220 million subscribers. The effort by Texas cities is not new. There are similar pending lawsuits in several states across the country, including Georgia, Indiana, Ohio, Nevada, and Tennessee, dating back as far as 2018. According to ARS Technica, the lawsuits are based on an unusual legal argument and don't seem likely to succeed, though. Essentially, the cities are claiming that Netflix and similar providers use the public right-of-way simply by offering video streaming services over the internet. At the heart of the franchise fee burden is the notion that cable operators pay municipalities in order to have the right to festoon their jurisdictions with wires. Streaming companies say their services don't fall under the same rules as cable companies because they don't have infrastructure like fiber optic cables or other wireline facilities. Quote, "These cases falsely seek to treat streaming services as if they were cable and internet access providers, which they aren't," a Netflix spokesman told The Verge. Continuing on, they said, "They also threatened to place a tax on consumers that the legislature never intended, and we are confident that the courts will conclude that these cases are meritless." The Tennessee Supreme Court heard oral arguments in May of this year, and a decision is expected during the court's fall term, which begins in September. The outcome of that case will likely decide the fate of lawsuits filed around the country. As those happen, we will keep you updated. Now, in some very bad news coming out of Facebook, the boomer book, is that we have Facebook complying with state subpoenas, warrants around abortion, and charges pending against a teenager. So this is very bad. It makes sense that they would do this, but it goes to show that there are over ramifications of what the getting rid of Roe means for people in the everyday. So let's talk about it. Now, Forbes have reported that a Nebraska teenager is facing criminal charges alleging she aborted a fetus in violation of state law after authorities obtained her Facebook messages using a search warrant. 17-year-old Khalees Burgess, who is being tried as an adult along with her mother, Jessica Burgess, is awaiting trial in Madison County District Court on charges that he broke a Nebraska law banning abortions after 20 weeks. This marks one of the first instances of a person's Facebook activity being used to incriminate her in a state where abortion access is restricted, a scenario that has remained largely hypothetical in the weeks following the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Nebraska currently outlaws abortions beyond 20 weeks. On Monday, Republican lawmakers in the state filed to secure enough votes to decrease that window to 12 weeks. Celeste and her mother were charged in July with allegedly removing, concealing, or abandoning a dead human body and concealing the death of another person after Norfolk Police Department received a tip claiming that Celeste had miscarried in April at 23 weeks of pregnancy and secretly buried the fetus with her mother's help. While Celeste told police that she had suffered a miscarriage, they continued to investigate, serving Facebook with a search warrant to access Celeste and Jessica's Facebook accounts. They subsequently found messages between the mother and daughter, allegedly detailing how Celeste had undergone a self-managed abortion with Jessica's help. There are 4 states that ban abortion at 24 weeks, and more than a dozen that broadly ban it at the start of fetal viability. After this story's publication, Meta spokesman Andy Stone said in a statement on Twitter that, quote, "Nothing in the valid warrants we received from local law enforcement in early June prior to the Supreme Court decision mentioned abortion. The warrants concerned charges related to criminal investigation, and court documents indicated to police at the time were investigating a case of a stillborn baby who was burned and buried, not a decision to have an abortion." Stone added that Meta was prohibited from sharing information about search warrants by non-disclosure orders, which have since been lifted. Now, it should be noted that nowhere on here had they mentioned that they would not comply with search warrants such as these, and Facebook broadly has complied with duly administered search warrants for a whole number of crimes. And this just goes to show the ramifications of overturning Roe. Continuing on, a month before Celeste was charged, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook's parent company Meta, was asked by employees how the company will protect those seeking abortions. Zuckerberg replied that the efforts to expand encryption across the platform will keep people safe, Cyberscoop reported. In May, Meta's VP of HR, Janelle Gale, told employees they were not allowed to discuss abortion at work, according to The Verge. The company later announced that it will reimburse employees who find they must travel to a different state to seek an abortion. Still, Meta has remained largely silent on how it will moderate abortion content in general. However, users recently noticed that Instagram and Facebook posts about acquiring abortion pills, such as mifepristone, were being systemically removed. At the time, Meta continued to earn revenue from anti-abortion advertisement containing dangerous misinformation, Media Matters found. Now, part of the reason why Facebook is probably going along with this is because those pills in some states are illegal. And so they don't want to run afoul of the law in those states and get sued and go into a legal ramifications dispute with a state. It's going to be very expensive to them, even if they ultimately win it. So that's why they're complying with all this, because at the end of the day, Facebook is a company and it wants to make money and keep business. So it's a very, they got to balance these things out in their interest, which is making money, but also keeping customers on the platform. So they're going to do things like this. Continuing on, though, an investigation by The Markup discovered that Facebook was collecting data from users interacting with abortion services websites and subsequently made that information available to anti-abortion groups as well through its data sharing programs. In response to pressure from employees, Google announced that it would delete location data of users who had used the platform to look up abortion services. All of the largest tech giants have been pressed on whether and to what extent they may cooperate in investigations that seek to punish women for seeking an abortion. In June, Meta spokesman Andy Stone told the Washington Post that the company carefully scrutinizes all government requests for users' information and often pushes back, including in court. Anyone who has seen The Handmaid's Tale, though, knows what it is like. What does this mean? Well, if we can give one small piece of advice over at Crowdsourced Politics, it is to stop using Messenger for talking about anything like this at all. Go to a different messaging app that has end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption means that the company itself is not able to access those records and therefore cannot comply with a subpoena by the state government, because that is how their business is structured. That's how their messaging service is structured. So that you can go to platforms such as Telegram, such as Signal, and a host of other messaging programs. I think Apple's internal text messaging service is end-to-end encrypted as well. But look up what is best for you and start utilizing those messaging programs instead. And that is what we're going to say about that. Continuing on with the news roundup, we're going to get into the U.S. economy, and we have big news on the inflation front. So there is finally as we've been saying on this program for a long time, since February, March, that inflation is going to see a decrease in numbers that are noticeable for people starting around July, and that is what we have seen. Prices at the wholesale level fell from June to July, the first month-to-month drop in more than 2 years, and a sign that some of the U.S. economy's inflationary pressures cooled last month. Today's report from the Labor Department showed that the Producers' Price Index, which measures inflation before it reaches consumers, declined 0.5% in July. That means it went negative from June to July. It was the first monthly drop since April of 2020 and was down from a sharp 1% increase from May to June. The easing of wholesale inflation suggests that consumers could get some relief from relentless inflation in the coming months. U.S. consumer prices were unchanged in July due to a sharp drop in the cost of gasoline, delivering the first notable sign of relief for wary Americans who have watched inflation climb over the past 2 years. More importantly, core inflation, which does not count price increases in the particularly volatile category of energy and food, held constant at 5.9% annually and was only up 0.3% compared to last month, continuing its downward trend since March. That's pretty much in line with the month-to-month changes in core inflation that happen under more normal economic circumstances when annual inflation is closer to 2 to 3%. As a result, there's a sense the new numbers could be pointing to a change, even if it's not enough information yet to be more hopeful. Quote, "We are at a major turning point in terms of inflation," said Brian Bethune, an economist at Boston College, who in an interview with The Hill called the figures a good sign. And Wharton professor Jeremy Siegel told CNBC, quote, Forward-looking inflation to me looks good, and it looks like the Fed can be more moderate," adding that although more rate hikes would be necessary, it wouldn't require as aggressive a response from the central bank as some have been expecting. Like we said, these are great numbers. Inflation's down, gas prices are down. Gas prices are down immensely, and they're continuing to drop. We have the ninth consecutive week of gas prices dropping here in Texas, in my local area. There are some gas stations that even are selling below $3 a gallon. Average prices in Texas usually, I thought, were a bellwether to the rest of the country, but it seems what actually happens is that Texas is one of the first states to see in prices fall, but one of the last states to see them rise. So there's one of those weird situations here going on. So yeah, it's pretty good news. We have great news for Democrats, great news for consumers, more importantly for everyday working Americans, that increase of inflation, massive drop in the increase, massive deceleration of inflation, going from 9.1% to 8.5%, a 0.6% drop from the previous month, which means we should see prices continue to go down, especially with core trending in general inflation prices. And like I said, this is some good news at the gas pump as well. Gas prices are below $4 a gallon for the first time since March, though the market remains precarious, and experts said it's too early to know if the move lower will hold. The national average for a gallon of gas has fallen for 58 straight sessions, according to the AAA, and is now at $3.99 per gallon. A fall from June, when prices topped out at about $5 a gallon, has been fast. Prices at the pump have declined for a number of reasons. First up, in the commodity market, there's a common saying that the cure for high prices is high prices, and that may be proving to be true. In other words, high prices bring down demand, which bring down prices. Some driving is necessary to get to work, for example, but with prices as at record levels, consumers might decide not to take a road trip or carpool with friends rather than driving solo. We've seen this show up in government consumption figures, which have shown a drop-off in demand. Some states have also suspended their gas taxes, which artificially pushes prices lower. And the main reason for the fall is the decline, but the main reason for that decline in gas prices, though, is the decline in oil prices. Crude is the single largest influencing gas prices, accounting for more than 50% of what we pay at the pump. West Texas Intermediate crude, the U.S. oil benchmark, shot above $130 per barrel in March after Russia invaded Ukraine, sending global energy prices reeling. It was the first time West Texas Intermediate crude traded at the level since 2008. But since then, oil prices have retreated, with gasoline prices following suit, albeit at a slower pace. Today, West Texas Intermediate crude traded at $93.51 a barrel. WTI traded at 93.51 a barrel. That is a drop off of just shy of $40 a barrel since its peak. In recent weeks, glowing recession fears have sent prices tumbling. Oil is vulnerable to any perceived softness in the global economy. And since slowdowns typically lead to lower demand for oil and petroleum products, the move below $4 begs the question of whether further declines are on the horizon. Experts say the relief may be short-lived. For one, WTI is far below its March peak. It has jumped more than 5% over the last week. And gasoline futures, while also well below their recent highs, are up 10% over the last week. So sending mixed signals here. The streak of daily declines in the retail price of gasoline is about to end, as crude prices and refined products futures have rallied off their recent lows, said Andy Lepau, president of Lepau Oil Associates. The global energy market remains on edge, though, and there are a number of factors that could push prices higher in the coming months. Refiners are running full out to keep pace with demand. A hurricane or another event that brings refinery outages could push up gasoline prices, since there aren't an alternative readily available, as Europe also looks for petroleum products. Additionally, the full state of the European sanctions against Russia fuel purchases has yet to go into effect. The country is a major energy producer, and so the EU stumbling to secure supplies from elsewhere could lift prices. But with that said, Russia is selling prices below market value as much as 30%. And since they're upping production to make up for the loss in revenue, since they have to sell people at a loss, that's bringing more oil online than what had been done previously. So it could be a wash. And this is all against a backdrop of high demand. The International Energy Agency said today that it now sees 2022 demand growth of 2.1 million barrels per day, which is 380,000 barrels per day higher than the prior forecast. Patrick Dehaan, head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy, said in a Thursday tweet that the drop in prices may stall over the next 5 to 10 days, but he added that the fall could be short term. The decline for gas prices has been swift, but they're still 81 cents per gallon. They're still 81 cents per gallon more than what consumers paid last year. The rapid ascent has been a major driver for inflation, since energy prices are a driving force in many categories. If food prices cost more to transport because of higher prices, for example, then food prices will increase as well. Inflation is currently running around its hottest level in the last 40 years. The latest CPI report did show that price pressures are easing a bit, in part because of falling energy prices and supply chains readjusting. In July, energy prices overall dropped 4.6% month over month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said on Wednesday. Gasoline prices fell by 7.7%. This is just 1 month snapshot, and with global energy markets still tight and very, very tight, the relief at the pump could ultimately prove temporary, though. But demand falls in the summer anyways, after the summer anyways, as people stop their summer vacations and stay more indoors. So maybe it'll be a wash. I personally think, despite all this news that we're saying, that gas prices will probably continue to fall for a little bit. But I don't think they're going to go back up. I think they're going to level off here. And we might be to a new quote unquote normal gas price of around $3.20 a barrel, a gallon or so. But we don't know. And as I said, this is a 1 month does not a trend make. So we need to see what happens next month and the month after and the month after to know where we're really at. But right now, things are looking good, and you have to tout the good news. And that's especially true with the job market. And that's what we're going to talk about next. And this is one of those situations where we just have to talk about it. We have to have good news about this. And that is that defying anxiety about a possible recession and raging inflation, America's employers added a stunning 528,000 jobs last month. Last Friday's report showed that all the jobs lost in the coronavirus-induced recession have been restored. Unemployment fell to 3.5%, the lowest rate since the pandemic struck in early 2020. July's job creation was 130,000 more than the number produced in June, and the most since February. Friday's job numbers from the Labor Department arrive amid a growing consensus that the U.S. economy is losing momentum, which is kind of bonkers. The American economy shrank in the first 2 quarters of 2022, but those numbers are not necessarily final, as the first number, as the last quarter's numbers are going to be adjusted as more data comes in, and that's going to happen this month. But this has been an informal definition of a recession. But most economists believe the strong job market has kept the economy from slipping into a downturn. And if it is a recession, it's one of the most mild recessions we've ever experienced. With that, Brian Colton has been quoted saying, "Recession? What recession?" And he's a chief economist at Fitch Ratings, wrote about the numbers that came out. He continued on saying the U.S. economy is creating new jobs at an annualized rate of 6 million. That's 3 times faster than what we normally see historically in a good year. Economists had actually expected to see half those jobs created. We're expecting to see only 250,000 jobs last month, and that got blown out of the water. Quote, "The strength of the labor market is in the face of rate tightening from the Fed. The strength of the labor market in the face of rate tightening from the Fed already this year clearly shows that the Fed has more work to do," said Charlie Ripley, senior investment strategist at Allen's Investment Management. Continuing on, he said, "Overall, this report should put the notion of a near-term recession on the back burner, at least for now." So that's what we want to say about the U.S. economy. And as we like to do with our news roundup, we like to close out the news roundup with some news of the weird. And this one is a little gross, a little bit of something about happening on your body, my body, everyone's body. It's a little bit disgusting, but it's interesting. We're going to talk about it. And it's called, there's bugs reproducing on your face? What is this? Well, this story comes from the New York Post about a creature that may be having sex on your face. Thought bed bugs were revolting? Well, these microscopic, quote-unquote, nipple mites make whoopee on people's faces may soon become one with humans, according to a skin-crawling study published in the Journal of Molecular Biology and Evolution. Quote, "Changes to their DNA have resulted in some unusual body features and behaviors," study co-author Alejandra Pretori of the UK's University of Reading said of the discovery. Pretori said was referring to a ubiquitous skin parasite which resides in hair follicles on people's faces and nipples and subsists on the oil released from our pores. And we're going to go over to this mite now. This thing here. This thing is what we're talking about. See this? That's an artist rendition, but we're talking about this thing. All right? In what wasn't revolting enough, these 0.3 millimeter long skin troples even mate on faces during the night. However, it appears that these follicular freeloaders' lovemaking habits have had terrible consequences. After analyzing their gene sequence, scientists found that they are merging with humans and may soon reside permanently within us. Quote, "We found these mites have a different arrangement of body part genes to other similar species due to them adapting to a sheltered life inside our pores," said Pretori of the sex-induced interspecies splicing. Potentially becoming one with humans isn't the only side effect of this gene reduction. For one, the mites are exclusively nocturnal as they lack UV protection, as well as the gene that causes animals to be awakened by daylight. They also can't produce melatonin, a compound that regulates sleep in small invertebrates, but are able to power their facial sexy time sessions by harvesting the substance from their human host. So that is what we're talking about here. It's kind of gross. It's kind of interesting. It is part of the human experience, and that's why we wanted to share with you. However, with that, I am sad to say that we are out of time. Now, we know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, so go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. If this is the first time you've tuned in, we do this every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing the news that was for the last week with the kind of analysis only a crowd can provide. So we want to thank you, the viewers, for tuning into us, because without you, we would just be a couple of people shouting to the void of the internet, and this makes everything worthwhile. We'll also like to say special thanks to our Facebook community, who provides some of the topics that we cover in the news program. If you have anything you would like to keep us up, you should join our Discord. Join our Discord. We're going to have contests there. You should join us. You should hit us up on Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll on Twitter, and join the Facebook community at Facebook/groups/Tribune Commons or /comments. And yeah, so that's everything. So thank you all again so much for joining us. And as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.